I want to talk a bit about what Bitcoin actually is, because I think it's a really misunderstood asset and investment and technology. So Bitcoin was set up as a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. So what does that mean? Peer-to-peer is when I come to the cake stall at the market and I hand $10 over to you, and that has been peer-to-peer with no third party involved, like a bank or a credit card company. So that's peer-to-peer. And since the dawn of the internet, software developers have been looking for a way to be able to send currency, value, cash across the globe without the need for a third party like a bank or a credit card company managing that transaction. Now, why did they want to do that? First of all, it's nicer. If I want to send money to my family in London for a wedding present, then it's nice to do it peer-to-peer without the complication and the complexity of a bank needing to be involved. What if I could do that absolutely directly with no fees and very, very quickly, instantaneously? Number two, fees. Coming into this fees factor, sometimes those fees can be exorbitant. If you're sending, for instance, money from the west to the east, you've got family in Bangladesh, not only might they be unbanked, which is a major problem, how do you get cash to them, but the fees, if they are banked, can be absolutely prohibitive. Number three, the other reason why I think it's become a really important and interesting technology is that I'm going to use the example of the Canadian truck drivers protest. And what we saw then, they were protesting in 2020 or 2021 against the vax mandates going across the border to the US. And you may or may not agree with them, agree with government, that's not the point. What the government did was they asked the banks on behalf of the government to freeze the bank accounts of those Canadian truck drivers such that they couldn't feed their families, pay for their groceries, pay for their utility bills over that week or two. Now, regardless of the issue, it set a precedent. And now governments across the world know that if they disagree with the actions of an individual or a group of people in their amongst their constituents, amongst the general population, then that is a tool at their disposal. And who knows what governments we get in the future and who knows what they agree and disagree with. So those are the reasons why electronic peer-to-peer cash was of interest. But it's problematic. It's very difficult to do this online. The problem that you're up against in the digital realm is that everything is replicatable. You can copy and paste absolutely everything in the digital world. It is well nigh impossible to create some level of moat and absolute ownership and verification. If I've got $10 ostensibly in my wallet or in a file and I send it to you for goods and services online, what's to say I haven't kept the original? I can't simply copy and paste and send the same $10 to another individual for different goods and services. So this is what we call the double spend problem. There's no way of verifying ownership of that original $10 and when and how it was spent with one versus another. So that's the problem, the double spend problem. And there were partial solutions to this worked out over the years by software developers, by cypherpunks as they're known, through the 1970s, 80s, 90s. But the person who cracked it in 2008 is the pseudonymous creator of Bitcoin going by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto. Nobody knows who that person is, he, she, or they. And that person put together a solution building on the giants in the software development industry over those preceding 3 or 4 decades. And the way that works is this. How does it overcome the double spend problem? So it starts with the blockchain. So at the moment, what happens online is that the way it's managed is that a bank or a credit card company or PayPal, they manage a ledger. They see that you want to send money to your family in London. They debit your account. They know they can verify that the money is in the account, and they can credit the other person's account. They're managing a ledger, and they're doing that privately. It's a private ledger run by the bank or the financial institution. The way Bitcoin does it, to create the possibility of electronic peer-to-peer cash, is by way of a public ledger known as the blockchain. And the blockchain watches and verifies every single transaction and records it, every transaction that has ever taken place with Bitcoin, from the very first block that was hashed on the 3rd of January 2009. The first lot of transactions were downloaded onto the first block, was really the second block, and every 10 minutes, a new block is hashed, downloading all the transactions from the last 10 minutes. So we can follow the chain of events from the original ownership of a Bitcoin or a part of a Bitcoin, and we can follow the entire chain. We're now up to over 938,000 blocks on this blockchain, getting close to 939,000. So what happens is, if I want to send my Bitcoin to my family in London, I broadcast that transaction to a massive network of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of nodes. We don't know how many there are, just people running this little tiny dedicated computer in their living room or their office at home. And that node has the entire blockchain downloaded onto it, and it's verifying. All those nodes all over the world are verifying each transaction as it comes through against the entire history of all the ownership of that piece of Bitcoin for all time. And once they feel satisfied that that is a legitimate transaction, you legitimately own and control that piece of Bitcoin and have the right to send that to another person, then that gets into a sort of holding pen called the memory pool. And then what we have is millions of miners all over the world now vying and competing for the right to hash the next block and download all those legitimate transactions from the last 10 minutes into the next block to add on to the blockchain. Now, in order to hash the next block, they are using huge amounts of computational power and energy to compete for the right to hash the next block. That energy usage is a feature, not a bug. The energy usage is securing and validating the entire blockchain and all the transactions on it, and making sure that no historical transaction can be changed and that no current transaction slips through that's incorrect or dodgy in some way. So all this energy is going into protecting the blockchain and verifying each transaction. And then once one of those miners has won the block, it gets added to the blockchain, it gets broadcast back out to all the nodes. Nodes then add that to their blockchain and they double check the block, and onwards and upwards with the next 10 minutes. Why would a miner spend all that energy and all that money in running the miner, running that energy in order to hash a block. Everything we've talked about so far, the protocol that underlies all of this, that set the rules in action to make this whole process work, the nodes, the miners, the transactions, the users, the buyers, all of that network and infrastructure is known as Bitcoin with a capital B. That's capital B Bitcoin. When the miners win the right to hash a block, they get rewarded in small b Bitcoin, the currency that you and I track the price of or hear about in the news. And importantly, one of the critical rules in the underlying protocol is that there will never be more than 21 million Bitcoin ever created. There will never be more than 21 million Bitcoin existing on the planet. It is the only finite asset. Shares can be reproduced and additional shares issued. Governments can print money and issue bonds and debt. Even gold comes out of the ground at the rate of 2% a year. So even that is inflationary. Bitcoin is absolutely scarce and hard capped, potentially the only finite asset on Earth. And that is part of what gives it value, along with this massive network and the infrastructure that's grown across the globe. So what you are buying when you buy Bitcoin is the underlying protocol, this capital B Bitcoin, this absolutely revolutionary technology that broke through for the first time ever digital scarcity and unreplicatable digits that can be protected, digital assets that can be protected. And you're buying that through lowercase b Bitcoin, the currency that you can utilize to send peer-to-peer across the globe for goods and services or as a gift. Or you can simply hold it and store it as a store of value, knowing that, like the Mona Lisa, except that there's 21 million of them, like a Pokemon card that goes for $16 million, this asset incrementally over time, in fits and starts and bursts, as we've seen over its 17 years of history to date, will hold value against inflation and against every other asset.